All right, let me ask you a question. Are you sick and tired of getting the phone call that sounds something like this? Hey, this is Nancy and Joe over at 321 Steamboat Springs Estates. And listen, we just want to inform you that we've decided to go with another agent at this point in time. However, we really, really appreciate the time and energy and effort you put into meeting with us, blah, 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 blah. And you end up losing out on tens of thousands of dollars of commissions yet again. Well, we're going to fix that in this video. And I'll shoot you straight. It's not all on you as to why you're losing opportunity. It's mainly has to do with how we're all taught. It's how we're conditioned to believe what sellers want, when in actuality, we're going to talk about what sellers actually want in this video. All right, so let's start this conversation talking about what the seller is actually buying at the listing appointment. Have you ever thought about this question? I mean, be brutally honest with yourself. What is the seller buying at the listing appointment? So in other words, when you actually go and meet with a prospective client and you go do your dog and pony show, what is it that you think that seller is purchasing from you? And this is a question that I often ask agents, and they don't have a good answer for it. I'm curious what your thoughts would be. Like, I would love for you right now to just, at this point in the video, throw in the comments what you believe sellers buy at listing appointments from realtors that they meet with who they're looking to list and sell their home. What is it that they're buying? And so the answer to that is a feeling of confidence that you're the right agent to get them to their desired outcome. That, my friends, is what they're purchasing. And based on your ability to communicate these things will certainly determine whether or not you win the business or that person goes with somebody else. You see, it's not what you say that determines whether or not someone does business with you. It's what I say to agents that I coach all the time. It's how you make people feel that will determine whether or not they do business with you. And so the problem is, however, is that 90% of all decisions are made emotionally, and only 10% are made intellectually or logic-based. This comes out of Daniel Kahneman's work. He is probably one of the most known psychologists on the planet. I'm sure you've gone through his book, Thinking Fast and Slow. It's probably one of the best books on human behavior and human decision-making, which is what we're in the business of. And so the issue with this, when I say the issue of this, is when we look and say, okay, well, let's really understand desired outcome. What do we mean by desired outcome? Well, number one, we're talking about the fact that the seller wants to, yes, maximize their net proceeds from the sale of their home so that, now that's the key thing. That's why I have it bolded. So that, because most agents stop here, they can get something, AKA another place to live, that's either smaller, bigger, new location, etc. Because, now that's the next caveat or the next piece of context of a life event. This is the why. This is the desired outcome. This is the why they're moving. So far we know that people make the decision emotionally, and what we're talking about, we call it emotionally. We're talking about why do they decide to move and why do they decide to hire one agent over another. And again, if we could just go back so that we're on the same page, we know that they're purchasing, when they're determining who the agent is that I'm going to work with, they're determining that decision emotionally. We know that. So it's a feeling of confidence. That's an emotion based on who they feel is the right agent to get them to their desired outcome. And their desired outcome, as we just talked about, is to maximize the profit of the sale of their home so that is the emotional part, to get something smaller, bigger, new location, etc., because the ultimate emotional thing is because of a life event. This is the why. This is the reason that they are moving. So they're going to do business with somebody. They're going to make the decision to hire an agent based on an emotion, how they feel, who can get them this. Now, hopefully you're with me so far. Here's the problem. This is how I was trained as a new agent, and most likely it's probably how you were trained, and it's still how agents are trained. And I know this for a fact because I'm talking to agents all the time that come from this team or this brokerage and that brokerage, and they are all taught wrong. They're all taught to do what we're going to talk about in this video. We're going to go even deeper. So what are most agents trained to sell at the listing appointment? Well, we know what sellers want to buy. We just covered that for the last, 5 or 10 minutes. The question then is, okay, well, what are agents actually selling? Well, they're selling features of the agent's services, of course. They're selling the features. What I'm going to do to sell your home. That's what they're selling, which leads us to the first big concept of today's video, which is the mule versus the magician. And after I explain this to you, it has the potential power to have one of the biggest aha moments of your career. It certainly did for me. All right, so I just want you to imagine for a second Farmer Bill, okay? And here's how the story starts. Farmer Bill right now pays on average about $2,500 per day to have mules plow his land so that he has healthy crops, he can make a profit, etc., etc. Now, it takes about 3 full days plus equipment, plus food to actually get the field plowed so that he can start working towards having healthy crops for his farm. And so that total cost is just over $10,000. Okay, so that's the setting. That's what we're going to work off of here. Now, Bob has all of this right now. Okay, so I want you to just imagine. Okay, so Bob has a farm. It costs him about $10,000 every couple of days. He's got this operation happening right now. And one day, Bob's mules all disappear. His equipment disappears. He's got a huge issue on his hands because he needs to get these fields plowed in order to continue to generate the revenue on his farm. And he shows up one day and everything's gone. Everything's gone. So Bob says, okay, what am I going to do here? So naturally, like anybody, he said, okay, let me go find somebody to do this work that I need done. So Bob goes out there and starts meeting with different service providers. Who's got some mules in the market? Who's got all the equipment that I need? Who's got the crew that I need to plow my fields so that I can start working on my crops so I can continue to earn the profit that this farm needs to keep staying in business? So he meets with multiple different people. He finds somebody that offers him a great deal. This service provider offers him 2 working mules. They're very healthy mules. They can even do it faster than Bob was doing it. Not only can they do it faster, but they actually charge less than it was costing Bob to plow the farm, plow the fields rather. And so their price, they quote him $9,500 to do the job. Bob turns around and says, okay, well, let me think about it and I'll get back to you by the end of the week, because Bob, naturally, like a lot of people, want to make sure that he's getting the most for his money. And so he continues to meet with other service providers, to which Bob finally says, okay, I really like that company. He goes to call them back and says, hey, we would like to move forward with you. To which that service provider says, well, you know what, Bob, I apologize, but we're actually booked now. We're booked out for the next 2 to 3 weeks. Now Bob's got an even bigger problem because I'm not an expert farmer, but from my understanding, if things don't get done on a timely fashion, the crops die, could cost hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue. And so now Bob not only lost out on the opportunity to get his fields plowed when he needed them to be plowed, he lost on a good service provider who could have done it. So now Bob has an even bigger problem. He went from a small problem to now a bigger problem. Okay, fine. So Bob's freaking out like any business owner would do who's on the hook for losing potentially hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue. So he starts pacing around the field, trying to figure out, what in the world am I going to do? As he's pacing through the field, a magician appears out of nowhere. So just imagine yourself, Bob. You're on the field, you're pacing, freaking out, and a magician magically shows up. And that magician says, well, listen, I understand, Bob, you need some plowing done here on the field. Do I have that right? To which Bob says, well, yeah, can you help me? The magician turns around and says, well, that depends. How much is it worth to you? By this time, Bob's willing to pay anything. I mean, he's not only is he out the $10,000 that it cost him to keep this thing going, he lost the opportunity to work with somebody who was going to do it for cheaper. He's got hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line. So this is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to Bob. Bob says, listen, at this point, I mean, I just don't care how much it costs. I have to get it done. So the magician, like magicians do, waves his wand and boom, the fields are all plowed. In less than a second, the field that Bob and the magician are standing on, the fields are plowed in less than a second. Bob says, oh my gosh, how did you do that? I mean, that just seems so easy for you to I mean, I've been doing these fields for years and years and years and years. It usually takes me 3 days and live animals and having to feed the animals and having to keep them healthy and all these equipment and all these service workers. And I've been trying to find somebody to do this for me. And you just did it in less than a second. To which Bob responds to the magician, well, how much do you charge for that? To which the magician says, it's not cheap. It's not cheap. It's $50,000. Bob says, that's crazy. $50,000? Look, these other people are doing this for $9,500 a day. So about $30,000. And look, they have crews, they have animals, they have all this equipment, they have all these people they got to feed. You just waved a wand. It was so easy for you to get that result. To which the magician waves his wand again and turns the fields back to their original state of mayhem and mess and proceeds to turn around and say, no problem. He continues to turn around and walk away and says, Bob says, wait. Can we negotiate? To which the magician says, well, I can charge you more and take longer if that's what you want. Of course, Bob says, no. I got to get this done. Pays the magician. Magician waves the wand and it's done. Now, how does this relate to our business of real estate sales? Well, it's very, very simple. You see, most real estate agents act like the mule. They go and meet with seller after seller after seller, explaining to the seller all the things that they're going to do to sell the home. We call it they show up and they throw up all over the seller. They say, well, Mr. Seller, I'm going to do open houses. I'm going to do social media. I'm going to do flyers. I'm going to do 3D virtual tours. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to work. So I'm going to do all these things for you, Mr. and Mrs. Client, which is selling to what part of the brain, my friends? Does that get you emotional, or is that selling to the logic brain? All of you are saying, well, yeah, it's clearly that's selling to the logic brain. It's a checklist of items. Here's all the things I'm going to do for you. Meanwhile, how do sellers actually make decisions? Emotionally. And it's no wonder why most agents end their listing presentation with sellers telling them, well, hey, this all sounds really good. We just have to think it over. You know, the famous TIO. We'll think it over and we'll get back to you. And what do they end up doing? They end up interviewing other mules in the market. And they train the seller to say, well, what are you going to do to sell my house, Mr. Mule? To which that mule says, well, oh, you met with those people? They can't compare to what we're going to do to sell your house. And they pull out this huge stack of their 97-point marketing plan. I'm going to do this. And we charge 5% to do that. To which the seller says, okay, you're going to do some social media. You're going to do some open houses, some professional photos. And you're going to charge me, wow, let me do the math. 5% on 500,000. Okay, you're going to charge me is that right? $25,000 to do these things? To which the seller starts to commoditize all the mules and says, well, I think I can get it done cheaper than that. To which the seller goes and interviews yet another mule and says, okay, I met with two mules. Here's what mule 1 can do. Here's what they charge. Here's what mule 2 can do. Here's what they charge. What can you do, Mr. Mule? And what do you think most agents do? It's a race to the bottom. I'll do all of that, those things. I'll do all those features, and I'll only charge 3% to do that. Okay, so you're going to charge me $15,000 to do the photos and the 3D tour. Man, it still sounds like a lot. And it's a race to the bottom, and the seller ends up going with the cheapest agent. And you're wondering, well, man, I don't understand. I do all these things. Maybe you're not getting this just yet. Let me tell you one more quick story. This is what I call the dentist frame. And I'll pull up my notes. So this is a story that I tell agents that I first start to coach because it's just so powerful. So here's the dentist frame. So Dan, who's a factory worker, he makes $18 an hour. He's got great benefits. One day, he's got this massive, massive toothache. And he's like, wow, maybe it'll go away, maybe it'll go away. Every day just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. I mean, he's in so much pain. He can't eat, can't sleep, can't do anything. He's got to go to the dentist and get this thing taken care of. So he goes and has to take time off of work, which cost him $18 an hour for every hour he's not working. And he goes and sees the dentist. He says, Doc, I got it. There's something going on here. Something going on here. To which the dentist says, oh, all right, let me take a quick look. Let me take a quick look. Gets in there, takes a quick look. Dentist says, oh, no big deal. We've got to go in there. We've got to pull the tooth. It'll take just a minute, and you won't feel a thing. To which Dan says, okay, great, Doc. How much is that going to cost me? Well, we charge $1,500. $1,500. Dan starts to do the math. Oh my gosh, how many hours am I going to work to pay this thing off? And he says, Doc, that seems like I mean, that seems like a lot for just a couple of minutes of work. To which the dentist responds and says, well, Dan, if it's the time you're worried about, I'm happy to take all day to do it and make it painful if you'd like. To which Dan, of course, like anybody else, says, no, get it out. I got to get it out. I got to get it out. Obviously, the dentist shows up as the magician, pulls the tooth in 2 minutes, and earns the money. Well, what's the point? The point is that you keep showing up at seller's home, not talking about what you're going to get done for the seller, but what you're going to do for the seller. You're focused on your features of the services you offer, when that's only communicating to the logic side of the consumer's brain versus communicating to the emotional side of their brain, such that the seller says, this is amazing. I mean, there's no other agents that are doing what it is that you say that you can get done for us. We met with all these agents and they all sound the same. Have you ever heard that before? The perception of the seller is that all the mules are the exact same. So therefore, it's in my best interest as the seller to go out and find the cheapest mule. So what I teach agents to do is communicate like the magician, such that the way they position, not what they're going to do for the seller, but what they're going to get done for the seller, the outcome that they're going to produce, creates an emotion in the seller that they can't explain, but they know it just feels right. This is the confidence that's being sold when you communicate like a magician, because your communication, the presentation, the conversation is built in a way around what you're going to get done for the seller versus what you're going to do for the seller. Because if your plan is to show up and throw up all your features, I'm going to do this thing and that thing and this thing and that thing, the seller just starts to calculate all this stuff in their head to say, okay, you're going to put this thing on Facebook. They start to say, well, you start to commoditize the service. You start to list out these features. And it's what every agent's taught on every team and every brokerage. Go there and go through these 37 things you're going to do versus showing up like the magician. Because here's the other thing. The seller says, wow, I mean, what is the seller doesn't want the stress of the sale of the home. They don't, if they could wave a wand and not have to hire a realtor and not have to deal with showings and not have to deal with inspectors and not have to deal with appraisals, and they could just sell their home peacefully, get the most money for possible so they can move on to in their life, that's what they would do. And oftentimes when you show up as the mule to overcomplicate things, to bring a whole bunch of complexity of all this stuff you're going to do, a confused mind never buys. So when we show up as the magician and we communicate clearly what we're going to get done for the prospect in such a way that they can't wrap their mind around exactly, wow, I can't believe how you're doing that. And you can communicate in that way, which is what I teach agents to do. It's a competition of zero. No other agents can compete with you.